Hello everyone and welcome to Grant Thornton's Leaders Lounge. We're delighted to bring you this series of conversations where we'll chat with some of the most successful and recognised leaders in Irish business today about their journeys to leadership, their lessons learned and their plans and hopes for the future. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Joe Wiley. Joe is the founder and CEO of Amryt Pharma plc, a global rare and orphan disease pharmaceutical group. Joe has over 20 years experience in the pharmaceutical, medical and venture capital sectors. He trained in general medicine in Trinity College Dublin, specialising in urology. He has an MBA from INSEAD and is a member of the Royal College of Physicians in Ireland. Before founding Amryt, he was a medical director with Astellas Pharma and had a number of venture capital investment roles. Joe, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
I'm very good, Stephen. Good to see you.
Good. I know we're in really strange times, Joe, and we're meant to have this conversation in our office, but everything is remote, so we'll make do with a virtual version of the substitute.
It's fine, Stephen. In fact, that gives me the opportunity to show off my logo in the background for a bit of free advertisement. So
that's free plug there. Absolutely. What I would like, we're all sick of depressing news about lockdowns and viruses and all that kind of stuff. So let's have a virtual swear jar that if anyone talks about any C words, and I'm talking about coronavirus and COVID there rather than anything else, we'll stick a virtual euro into the jar and we'll settle up later on. So we'll see if we can avoid that topic for the rest of this conversation. Is that okay with you?
Sounds good to me.
And I want to come back to Amareth and the incredible achievements you and the team have had to date there, not least the recent NASDAQ listing and getting to ring the closing bell, which was a huge achievement. So we'll come back to that. But let's go back a little bit first. Tell me about your early days, the young Joe, where you were brought up, where you went to school, all that stuff.
Sure. So I'm from the country. I grew up in County Meath, in a place called Stamullen. When I grew up, it was very much the countryside. I remember my cousins coming from the city and they would be scared at night time because there was no lights. Now that area has become commuterville to Dublin with the advent of motorways. But in my day, if you got stuck behind a tractor going into town, that was pretty much you done for the rest of your journey. So I grew up there, went to school in a local national school, and then went to secondary school to Gormerson College. And my father at the time wanted me to go to the local Christian Brothers school, and my mother wanted me to go to Gormerson. Gormerson was a fee-paying school. We didn't have a lot of money growing up, and quite frankly, it was a struggle to send me to a fee-paying school. The reason I went is because I, at the time, was getting some grinds. This is a very old Ireland, from a nun called Sister Joseph, who lived in a local enclosed order, a convent that was beside us. And we used to go in as 11 and 12-year-olds in to see her, and she would be there behind bars, literally behind bars, teaching us our tutorials. So it was she who convinced my religious father to send me to Gormerson. So I went to Gormerson College, which was a wonderful experience. It was a brilliant school full of good academics, but also very sport orientated, and that really suited me.
Yeah. And how did you end up in medicine? Was that a family tradition?
Well, my father is a scientist. He was worked for OLIS, which was called back in the days now Enterprise Ireland. So he did science in college. I was always attracted to the science side of things, and in many ways, I didn't really know what my choices were. As a lot of people, I think maybe of my era and our era. You kind of thought of a limited number of choices, right? I liked science, and I liked the idea of helping people, and therefore medicine was a good choice for me. So went to Trinity and did medicine in Trinity, and had a pretty wild time for 6 years in college. The advantage of going to med school is it's 6 years rather than 4.
Yeah. You must be quite academic. It's not easy to get into medicine these days, and I presume it wasn't back then either.
Yeah, I was fortunate that school came easy to me. So for me, obviously it was a challenge for sure, but I pretty much knew I could do it. Sister Joseph's grinds were obviously had helped, and yeah, I managed to get in, so that was pleasing.
Yeah. So how did you end up switching from the kind of academic clinical side into the business side that you're in now?
Yeah, so I did medicine. This was in the late 80s and early 90s. I remember looking around at all the people in college at the time thinking, well, at least I know I have a job. I'm not sure what all the rest of you are going to do, right? There's medicine gives you a job at the end, right? And that's what I did. I did clinical medicine for 8 years post finishing college, and subspecial. I did clinical medicine rather than surgery or others, and was attracted to neurology. I liked figuring things out, and neurology is basically it's solving puzzles. So that I did that, but ultimately I got to a stage in my medical career, Stephen, where I was turning 30. I was pretty much at the end of my training. I also had a bit of time to think because I did research over in the US, in the Mayo Clinic in the US, and I found myself staring down a microscope a lot, so that gives you plenty of time for thought. And I sort of asked, do I really want to do this for the rest of my days? And surprised myself really in some ways to say, actually, no, I really don't. So I wanted a bit more of a challenge. I had exposure to the commercial side of things through working with a pharmaceutical company doing clinical studies, and was attracted to that and started to ask questions, is it even in the art of the possible to switch career at this point? And a lot of people thought I was crazy. Some people thought I was having a midlife crisis early, including my good wife. But ultimately, I learned about MBAs, and an MBA was a passport for people like me who wanted to maybe try something else. I was very lucky because my supervisors I was at this point on a training scheme in neurology. I was 18 months off completion to become a consultant neurologist, and my supervisors A thought I was crazy, B thought I was having a moment, and they kept the role open for me, which was very good of them. So I went off and I did my MBA and then moved into VC. And I remember getting a call from my mentor about 2 years later saying, so, are you over it yet? Are you coming back? And I said, no, in fact, I'm happy with what I've done. So I moved away.
Okay. And then venture capital, why venture capital rather than just getting stuck into a single business?
Because that's all it was useful for, frankly, Stephen. Right? So I had a medical career, including research. So I understood science, and I had a freshly minted MBA, right? But that was it. I had zero commercial experience, right? So the only thing that I thought I would be anyway useful at was looking at life science companies and trying to assess whether the science made sense and build my commercial experience over time. So I was fortunate again. I got a role working for a group called Advantages Venture Capital in Switzerland. So we moved from Fontainebleau, which is just out of Paris, where INSEAD is, to Geneva, and started my career working for those guys.
And I guess having an eye for a sound investment is a great asset to have. And if you tell me you've had 100% success over all your investments over the years, my next question is invalid. So I'm hoping that you'll say that you didn't get it right all the time, but you're able to pick up lessons learned from even the failures.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Particularly in life science investing, the attrition rate in what we do now and what I was assessing then in terms of drug development is extraordinarily high, right? So in many ways, you're kind of crazy to think about bringing a drug. They call it from bench to bedside, which is all the way through development. And just to put some numbers on that, Only 1 in 100 drugs that goes into clinical development ultimately will make it. And the average cost across the industry is said to be now 2 billion. That's not to say that it costs 2 billion to develop a drug. It does not. It often costs hundreds of millions, though. But because of the really high attrition rate, the average to get drugs to market is of that order. Yes, I mean, not just because of biology, though. I made my own fair chunk of mistakes too. The thing I've probably learned the most, which has been most helpful in my career overall, and most helpful certainly in my job now, is it's all about the people. It's all about the people. I would much rather, as an investor, put a mediocre technology in the hands of really good people than a phenomenal technology in the hands of poor people. And that's something I learned particularly.
Yeah, and I suppose you've really got it cracked if you can find the right people, but also with the right technology, which probably brings me on to Amryt. So how did Amryt come about? How did you first get involved?
Yeah, so I guess a little bit of relevance would be what I did after Inventure. So I went to the UK, worked for Aberdeen Asset Managers, started off working in an early stage fund, and then latterly joined their private equity group. So I found myself doing leverage buyouts in the UK mid-market, and that experience was phenomenal, and I learned a huge amount from it. Including how to structure transactions. So that was really, really good. I worked for Savvas then back in Ireland for a period as a medical director. And then before setting up Amryt, worked for a group called Sofanova Ventures who had set up an Irish office, and I opened and led their efforts in Ireland. That was important because it gave me good visibility on all of the drug development assets across Europe. And what I realized is that actually the opportunity set in Europe is as good as it is in the US, but there's 10x less capital in biotech in Europe than there is in the US. So having worked for a US group and got to know a lot of the people across the other side of the pond, I felt there was an opportunity to leverage that, right? So to leverage the opportunity that existed in Europe and the experience of being able to access the capital markets in the US, and therefore decided to set up the company. The other thing I learned is a little bit to your earlier point is, if to set up a company. A lot of people set up companies with a drug discovery idea, and fair play to them because it's incredibly hard, right, to do that. What I wanted to do was to get a company that became commercial as fast as possible. So that was the idea. So the idea was to be acquisitive and to buy assets from other people, leveraging off the investment that they'd put into it, do deals well, right, to be able to structure transactions that created value and become commercial. That was the idea, really. And then a passion was to focus on rare diseases, and the reason for that was, it's motivating. It's what gets us up in the morning. These are diseases that most people have never heard of, right? And often they don't have an approved treatment. So for me, developing the next generation of blood pressure tablet it's interesting, but it's not particularly motivating given that there's a plethora of other options. But to develop the first ever drug for EB, or epidermolysis bullosa, which is one of our development areas, in a truly horrific disease, to be able to help these kids, that's enormously motivating. So that was one side of things. The other side of things is, because I said I wanted to be a commercial company, obviously that's challenging as a startup, right? You want to commercialize drugs around the world. How do you go about doing that? Well, in rare diseases, the model is small numbers of patients being treated by small numbers of physicians, often in small numbers of centers. That means we can have a commensurately small commercial footprint and address the global market opportunity. And we've proved that by doing so. We're now a global commercial business.
And that's what an orphan disease is. Is it about there's currently no effective cure or treatment?
Yeah, they're called orphan disease. An orphan disease is a disease that affects small numbers of people, effectively. And often it's tiny. We actually operate often in the ultra orphan space. So, for example, a number of our conditions that we treat, the prevalence of those conditions is 1 per million of the population. If you think about that, that means there's 350 patients affected in the whole of the United States and 450 affected in the whole of Europe with these conditions. They're ultra orphan or ultra rare. They're called orphan because historically they were orphans. These conditions were orphans because nobody wanted to touch them because of the really low numbers of patients. So therefore, it was completely wrong that if you had a common disease, you had, like, I go back to blood pressure, you have any number of options. Whereas if you have a rare disease, you often had no option at all. And that was recognized by both regulatory authorities and by governments across the world. And there are now in place incentives for companies like us to develop drugs for these rare or orphan diseases.
And they include fast tracking of FDA approvals and that kind of stuff. That's correct?
Yeah, so there's both regulatory incentives and also there are financial incentives. So you've mentioned fast track. It's a really good one. We have fast track designation for our product Savvas, which has just completed a positive phase 3 study in EB, that disease I just mentioned, the worst disease you've never heard of, which we're really, really pleased at. That fast track designation allows us to get a priority review, right, which accelerates the process of potential approval, and also it allows us to, well, we've also got a thing called pediatric rare disease designation. I don't want to get too technical, but what that means is that we are entitled, if we're successful in the US, to get a thing called a priority review voucher. And priority review vouchers, or PRVs, are enormously valuable because they can be sold, right? And the going rate for those is $100 million, and we're entitled to a PRV if we're successful with our product, which we hope we will be next year.
Okay. And I know, like, Amryt has a number of very successful commercial products already, but just coming back to Savvas and its treatment for EB, we're all very aware of Deborah Ireland and Deborah UK, who's a charity that looks after victims or patients of EB. So what does Savvas do for those individuals?
So Savvas is designed. So let me explain what the disease is, right? So it's a defect in the genes, so it's genetic, that code for the proteins in your skin that hold your skin together. So an example is, there's different subtypes, but an example is collagen 7. Collagen 7 is a protein in your skin that creates a thing called an anchoring fibril. Again, not getting too technical, but the anchoring fibrils in your skin look like and act like the Velcro of your skin. So they hold your skin layers together. If you lack the Velcro in your skin, minor trauma, such as pulling on socks, will rip your skin off, right? And that's what these kids are born with. So they oftentimes there's no indication before birth, but as they're born with these horrific wounds all over their bodies. It's incredibly traumatic for parents. And I've described that the current standard of care, the best that Western medicine has for these kids, is medieval. Why? Because what we do is we wrap them in bandages and we send them home. That's it. And that's it for life. These kids spend their entire lives wrapped in a body bandage, and there's no treatment, right? So you've mentioned Deborah. Deborah do enormously good work working with these families, helping with the burden of disease, helping try to give the carers, actually often it's the carers who really struggle, because as one mother told us when she spoke to us, the really traumatic part is that when you're changing, for example, the child's nappy and the skin rips off, the child thinks that the parent is actually deliberately hurting them. So it's truly horrific. So we work very closely with Deborah, both in Ireland, UK, but actually Deborah International, Deborah America. We're that's why we're so pleased that our product does actually help. What it's designed to do, to answer that question, is to try and accelerate the process of wound healing. we're not right now able to prevent the wounds from breaking down. But once they do break down, if you think about it, if your skin's ripped off, you want that wound healed as quickly as you can. So that's what our product is designed to do. It's designed to heal it up, accelerate that process and heal it up as fast as possible. We do have a gene therapy in development. It's in preclinical development right now. But that product, if successful, will alter the genetic makeup of the skin and give back that protein that makes the Velcro of your skin, and hopefully then the skin will make its own Velcro again.
I've watched some of the videos on EB, and to be quite honest, it is really upsetting. So I mean, I'm so happy that a company such as Amryt is addressing that unmet need. So obviously, the best of luck in your future research and product development in that regard. The NASDAQ bell, you must have been so proud of that. Your first day of trading, you got to ring the virtual closing bell. How did that make you feel?
Enormously proud. Not just personally, but for the entire team. So because of this strange world we live in, I've avoided putting the euro in the box by saying the C word. We couldn't go and do it in person, right? So it was done virtually, and it's the oddest thing you're ever going to do, because what we had to do was basically spend a minute clapping and looking cheerful, right, into a video, which you can do quite easily for a few seconds, but I challenge you to do it for a minute and see how hard it is. It just feels completely wrong. So but the final product was outstanding, because we had an animation on the NASDAQ building on Times Square of the Amryt logo, and then as the closing bell happened, we were all there in 60 feet height, our entire team clapping and looking very pleased with ourselves. So it was a great day, and it's something that we've been able now to use internally, etc., for motivation, etc., for everybody. We're very pleased by it.
Yeah, and I guess for full transparency, I'm the audit partner for Amryt, so I know a number of your team very well, and I've very rarely come across people who are as hardworking and loyal at the same time. But you seem to have a team that does that. So is that something that's really important to you, the team around you? It's
the most important thing, right? So it's the thing I've learned most. I alluded to it earlier. It's really all about people, right? So to be successful as a business comes down to individuals, right? So do people go the extra mile? Will they work the long hours required? Are they the right fit, right? So will they act ethically? Right? In our business, that's everything. So yeah, the thing I've tried to do most is build a great team around me, and also Rory Nealon is my CFO. He was my co-founder of Amryt. So I wanted to also mention that Rory was the co-founder of the business, and we very much built a team around us. In that regard, we actually took a view that for our senior leaders, because trying to find people to join effectively a startup with a skill set was challenging. We took the view that we wouldn't demand that everybody had to live in Ireland, and that was a choice at the time. So our senior leadership team is spread out, and that creates its own challenges, and you need to deal with that. But actually, it was probably the best decision we made, because we were able to then get really, really good, the best people that we wanted into the business.
Yeah, sure. And you can see my lights have gone out here, so we're an energy saving business here as well. But we'll plow on ahead, time we don't even notice that. What would those guys say about your leadership traits? If you weren't in the room, how would they describe your leadership?
Actually, I know exactly what they'd say, because they've told me. I recently undertook a 360 feedback exercise with my team, which I then shared with the team, warts and all. So I'm fully aware of the good and bad. At Amryt, we culture is everything. I believe. One of the things I want to create is an open culture where feedback is not just expected but sought. So what they say about me is that I have a challenging leadership style, both good and bad. So I challenge people to make better choices. So when people come with a proposal, I will challenge them. Is that the right thing to do? Have we thought about all the angles, etc.? Sometimes that can be intimidating, actually. So that's my work on. But I also have a very open and collaborative style. So I really seek feedback. We did that exercise, but also I want ideas from everybody, because part of building a great team is to leverage off their collective experience. There's really no point in having people with lots and lots of great experience if you're not using that and utilizing that. So that's the feedback.
Okay, and when we were setting up this call, you mentioned that today is actually a wellness day for all of Amryt employees, and I gather, in a nutshell, emails are banned and everyone is required to take the day off without distraction. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, everyone but the CEO would appear, because my day is suddenly very busy. But so we did this before, actually. This is the second time this year we did it at the Easter time. It's really again not putting the coin in the box around. It came from the situation we found ourselves in that everybody is now remote, and we've done some work on that and got feedback across the team. And whilst that's in some ways good, but what people really find is that you go back-to-back Zoom pretty much all day long, and it can be quite stressful, right? So plus dealing with the stress of the current situation is really challenging for people with childcare, et cetera. So we wanted to try to create some time where we said to people, okay, we appreciate that you are putting in the extra hours, that you're working really hard for us, and so let's all take a collective step back, where we can just take some time off, and be with your family and de-stress a little bit. And I have to say it's gone down incredibly well, both the last time and this time. And we have banned emails. So I've warned people that they'll be in trouble if they start sending emails today. There's a few sneaky ones going around, but mostly they're coming to me. So I'll forgive that.
It's a fabulous idea. It's a lesson for us all to take on board, I think. In terms of your own wellness, I know you're big into sport. We've been to a few big rugby matches over the years. How do you switch off? How do you balance working extremely hard with having some time to spend with the folks at home?
Yeah, that's a huge challenge. I've certainly been on the wrong side of that, Stephen. When we were at some of those games together, I was a good bit heavier than I am now. But what I've actually started doing is carving out time to focus on wellness and being fitter. So I now carve out time in my diary, and I make no apologies for it that I won't anymore do back-to-backs all day, every day, which is what I was doing before. And actually what we've just done is we've now rolled that out to our senior leaders. So we've created a wellness program, and I'm encouraging people to carve time out of their days 2 to 3 times a week. It's only an hour, right? But people can then focus on nutrition or whatever it is, or exercise, which is what I'm doing. When you reach a certain age, the only team sport you do is watching it on the telly. I do play tennis, and inevitably play golf. So that's what I do.
Joe, I think you're dead right. I think physical health and mental well-being are so close hand in hand, the same way as, you know, there's no such thing anymore as work life and home life. I think it's just life. So you do have to kind of carve out some quality time or some time for yourself just to be able to switch off. Getting close to the end, if you had 3 tips in terms of leadership, do's and don'ts, or lessons that you've learned over the years, could you share those?
Sure. I mean, you know, there's all kinds of things, but I guess for me, I've already alluded to it. The one thing that you should do, in my belief, and we've done well, is build a great team. So, you know, realizing that you're not brilliant at everything, and I'm certainly not. There's certain things I'm particularly rubbish at. Building people a team with complementary skill set is enormously important. So I would probably say that is my number one do. My second do is completely related to that, which is something that as an entrepreneur, I struggled with, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with, which is to empower that team, right? Because, you know, you do like to make decisions, right? You wouldn't do it, set up a business unless you did like that. And it's hard to let the baby go a wee bit, right? So yeah. Empowering the team to make decisions, because after all, you've hired them for their skill sets, so you need to allow them the autonomy to go off and make their own decisions. And then the third thing for me that is a big do is to focus on people and culture within the business. I've seen this time and time again, both my investment career and also in this, because we acquire companies, we acquire different cultures, and building a cohesive culture and building in your values into that, which then creates the right behaviors, is enormously important. Because if you don't do that, it can become quite toxic quite quickly, and that's a road to disaster. So I would say focusing on people and culture is my third do. Okay, great. And then optimism for the future. How big or great do you think Amryt can be? Well, so we've gone from a startup with 2 people in August 2015 to now a global commercial business with just about 200 people around the world. And we have given revenue guidance this year that we would expect our 2 commercial assets to do between 170 to 175 million in revenue this year. And we have a product that, as we've spoken about, has just got positive data. We hope that will be approved late next year, and we'll go and launch that. We expect that product to do hundreds of millions, frankly, of revenue at peak. And we continue on our strategy to acquire, develop, and commercialize products. We're currently listed on both AIM in London and on NASDAQ, more recently in the US. Market cap is circa 400 million. Our hope and expectation is to more than double that in the next little while. And hopefully, as we continue to deliver on what we say we're going to do, and that's critical, it's delivering on your promises, we can accomplish that. I've no doubt with your track record and that of your team that you're not overstating that. Full confidence in you. Joe, you've had a wonderful career to date. It was really, really great to hear your insights and your views on leadership. So I'd like to thank you dearly for joining us today. Also like to thank all of our listeners. That was the second in our virtual Leaders Lounge series. I hope you enjoyed it, and we hope to see you tuning in again soon. Thanks, everyone. Thanks again, Joe. Bye-bye. Thanks, Stephen.